Welcome to the Jumpstart Show, Monde.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. It's great. It's great.
No, thanks for
Thank you so
making
much.
time, and thanks for making time. I was speaking somewhere, and then we went there with Monde. There was accompanying me, and we're talking about the books we're reading, and we realized that we're actually reading the same book. Umzuzo Nozama. They bought me this book by Myles Munroe, and today I want us to do something that I call reading with your eyes open. You know. First, before we continue into the book, I know you have some very interesting things that you have learned from the book, some very interesting ideas that came up from the book. Can you just tell us who is Monde?
Monde is a young, handsome man.
Wow!
I'm pursuing a degree in entrepreneurship at UJ. I'm currently part of CAF, which is Christian Action Fellowship. Edwards, and I'm also leading a team which deals with leadership, political awareness.
LPAD.
LPAD, sure. Yeah. And apart from that, I'm quite interested in leadership, and also and just understanding men. Before I was LPAD leader, I was men's fellowship leader at CAF as well. I'm from all the way in KZN, in a small town called Crichton. However, Mhlampe
Doesn't sound like a KZN place though.
it's in KZN. It's mostly surrounded by farmers.
Oh.
Yeah. I usually say I'm from Aikopo, Ekopo.
Oh.
Which is like the most nearest town to us. Gumzulu nje kahle.
So tell me, Monde.
Yeah.
You've been reading this book, man.
Sure.
What do you think about this book? How did you find it?
This book came at the right time, actually. Whereby we're having so many challenges in defining manhood.
Sure.
And what makes up a man, you see. Because we're at a time whereby there is no real distinguishing factor between a man and a woman.
Sure.
And we are moving towards that type of living, whereby the only thing which defines manhood is their reproductive part. You see, this book tries to emphasize, not from a roles perspective, but from a purpose and identity perspective, what a real man is. Times are changing, right? And some roles cannot be relevant now. So we can't just say, okay, now because, I mean, we are living in that culture, we can't just say, women, go to the house, stay and leave me. No, they also want to go out there, make some money, and be career women, because that's the culture we're living in. So we need to look at it in a different manner. Is it really what we are called for? That a woman really is called to be in the house? Right? Or is there something bigger and better that they are called for in terms of purpose, not just in terms of growth?
But I think it's quite important that at this stage, before we continue with our conversation, we specify, Oguti, this book is written from a Christian perspective. I think that is very much important, because in these debates, you know, there's quite a lot of different views that people have. We're talking from a biblical perspective. We're talking from a Christian perspective. A lot of people do know Myles Munroe, so it's quite great. He has written something like this. So for me, I really appreciated the fact that it's grounded in the scriptures. You know, as a Christian, I value that. But also, I feel as much as he's looking at what is a man from a biblical perspective, to some degree, I do feel that he kind of go back to the idea of rules. I don't know, maybe it's just me. And we'll talk about it, obviously, as we continue with our conversation. But I also found that identifying the problem as not being it's not being in maleness, but it's how we understand our identity and our purpose as men.
I think for the longest time, we have defined manhood from a wrong source. it has left us in a quite confusing state, because
Sure.
we are living in times where what we used to define manhood as has changed. Roles have changed now.
Yeah.
Because
And they continuously change. They're changing all
it's
the
a
time.
continuous thing. So we need to look at something more deeper, something more fundamental, something more inherent in us, in order for us to really understand what is manhood from a Christian perspective.
Sure, from a Christian perspective.
Yeah, sure. Because we need to be careful here.
Yeah, I want to read a quote in the first chapter, in the introduction, in what he described as the male crisis, or the male in crisis. He says here, historically, men have defined their manhood by various roles they have fulfilled for their families and society. Now that these roles are in transition, they don't have a solid definition of masculinity to give them a cultural context for life. As a result, many men believe they have lost part of themselves, but they don't have anything concrete with which to replace it. So he's arguing here that because these roles are continuously changing, as you were saying, there's nothing really concrete with which to replace the idea of roles. And I think, as you said, what he's trying to offer us here is that, okay, what is concrete, as you said, is something that is within us, it's not a performance that we do. It's about purpose and about identity. So I think it made sense to me when he argued that, the problem that we have is that people have lost understanding of the purpose of God for the male person, and the identity of the male person according to the Creator. Because I think that's very much important for us to understand. Identity is a very complex concept. There are a lot of things that people use to create their identities, or through which they understand their identities. There are many lenses that people put through which they understand their identity. But what he's drawing us back to here is understanding it from the perspective of the Creator. And he goes on to that purpose and identity. I don't know what you think of that.
You see, to many people who might just read this book, they might see it as a bit contradictory, because when he begins, some of those things still seem to be roles. Okay, because it speaks about things like vision, and being a leader. He speaks about being a protector. Right. He speaks about being a provider. He speaks about cultivating. Some people, that also still forms part of roles.
But you're saying some people.
Yeah.
Do you agree with him? Do you agree with him on this one? Or do you still think he's taking us back to the roles?
In this time around, he's giving it more room to say, what does protection mean in our day? Okay.
Yeah.
What does
he spoke about, security, emotional security, all those kinds of things.
We're not only looking at the physical part of protection. Also looking at, are we really guarding their emotions when we speak to women? In the context of marriage. As he presents it, it's not to say this is it or else. Okay. It's not to say if you don't go to gym, so you're a child. You see. So I think that's the beautiful thing which he introduces, to say it's still intrinsic in us. I mean, it's inherent in us to want to protect, to want to lead, but it's not giving us a directive to say this is what you have to do.
No, but that's how he presents it, because he's saying here, this is the purpose of God for the male person. God created the male person to protect, to provide, to cultivate, to do all these things. So isn't that a directive to say this is what a man should be?
It's not speaking to specific tasks
Yeah.
I don't know.
But what I'm arguing here is that it's still about roles. Because what I'm feeling is that what he's still doing here is to say, to be a man, you need to perform these roles. You need to protect, you need to cultivate, you need to provide, you need to teach, you need to do all these things, you need to lead, right? But what he's doing, he's saying, I'm taking these roles from a different source. And not, the social, is not as socially constructed that, societies and culture, that's where we draw our roles. As so determined by society, but as determined by scriptures, right? That's what I feel he's doing. But I also find that to be quite problematic.
Sure.
Because of this. Number one, these roles, or what he defines as a true man, or a real man who does these things, it's somebody who is married. It's defined in the context of a marriage, in the context of a family. I'm a young man. How does the book help me to understand what it means for me to be a man? Because I don't have anyone to provide for.
Yeah.
I'm not expected to provide for anyone.
So are you now less of a man if you are not married?
Because I'm not married and I'm not doing that.
Now it almost seems to be like we as men, what we need to look up to really become men is marriage.
Sure.
And meaning that men who are not married, perhaps now they are less of men. So I'm also finding some trouble with that. Even if we are not married, you can still have a mindset of leading.
Sure.
You can still protect your own space.
Protect yourself.
Protect yourself. Protect your assets.
Sure.
All those things.
But can't a lady do that? Can't they be leaders? Can't they protect their own spaces? Can't they protect their own assets?
Of course.
So then what is it that differentiates? What is manhood?
The thing,
if that can still apply even to a woman.
To a woman. Here's what he argues, that where purpose is unknown, abuse is inevitable.
Sure.
The makeup of a thing determines the purpose of the thing.
Sure.
All right. So now we can't disagree the fact that women can lead.
Sure.
Women can protect themselves.
Sure.
Women can do almost everything that a man can do.
They can teach.
They can. Actually, everything in this year, I would believe there's some women who can do every single one of them. The deeper question is, should they, according to their purpose? You see, just because something is able to do something else doesn't mean it's necessarily created to do that.
Okay, no, fair enough. I hear you. It's just that for me, it was unsettling.
Yeah.
The way he defines it. As much as I do believe Guti, he has kind of shed some light to the issue, but I still believe Guti, he has not really provided us a solution to the problem, because the way he defines it, it still does not make a clear distinction between a male and a female. But also, I think what I also find to be problematic in this is how he says in page 128, a leader often cannot be ruled by emotions or sentiment, especially when he has to make difficult decisions. That is why God designed a male differently from a female. The male is not emotional, even though he has emotions. He feels a great deal, but because of his purpose, his feelings are generally not the principle of consideration. What do you think?
Our thinking is more sequential.
Okay.
More systematic, in terms of we want to deal with things at a time. We can't really deal with multiple things happening in the same time. And women are more in tune to feel.
So I want to ask you a question, Chief. Do you think that is how men and women are inherently create, or are? That's how they are inherently, or it is how they are socialized into the world? Because I think, socialization can play quite a big role in that.
Sure.
If you look at how people are raised,
Sure.
and the expectations, that are expected of them, and the things that they are forced to do.
Sure.
I
I personally think it's something we are born with.
okay.
I think it's something we are born with.
Sure.
But here's what I think God's wisdom is at, because if there was only things which men are supposed to do, and if men were not going to do them, then we would be doomed as society. Then we would not have society at all.
Sure.
Because if men were, if only men were able to protect and women cannot protect, only men could lead and women cannot lead. What happens, for example, in a family whereby the father passes away?
Exactly.
Is the family now in doom?
I think these things are different in different societies.
Sure.
In South Africa, there's a nuclear family, and then there's a different type of a family, an unconventional type of a family. You find that a lot of women are holding their households.
Yeah.
And you cannot see the gap because the father ran away. But in case, there are very few cases where you see the mother dies or she runs away, which I've never kind of heard of that.
Sure.
But it can happen, and then you find that the father is left with the children, and the household still stands. Even in households where you find the father is there, but you can actually see with the mother is the one who's holding it together. How do you explain such a situation?
Here's the thing, though. That's what we are growing up with, right? But in the same light, when you go to communities such as that,
Sure.
we have a lot of such cases.
Yeah.
That is where we see a lot of young men who are going astray.
Why?
If I can say.
Why do you think that's happening?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We can say that perhaps maybe if there was a man in the house.
We're running away from the question.
Sure.
Myles argues that men are not emotional, even though they have emotion. And I think I have a problem with that statement.
No, men are emotional. They express their emotions differently from women. If I can.
Is it something that is inherent in them or something that they are taught? Because I find Uguti, some of the problems that a lot of men are facing arise because of this thing that we have been taught. We grow up being taught that as a man you have to be
strong.
You can't appear to be emotional. You shouldn't cry.
Remember, the culture is to say men need to be head. They need to be strong. Now, who's gonna be strong if everybody in the family is crying?
Crying means you are weak? I don't think so.
But
you're just acknowledging the pain.
Sure. However, we need people who are gonna man up. Okay. But here's an interesting study. Besides that, I was listening to this on YouTube recently. It says actually there was an army of both men and women. What they were doing a study to see who can work well under pressure and so on and so on. And part of the study says men were more able to bear more losses, handling more losses of soldiers than women could. Women could easily break down. Men could handle more and continue fighting more. So when I'm saying that they were trying to solve an issue, it was to say, if everybody is breaking down, let there be someone who's going to stand.
Why not teach everyone to stand?
I'm the man.
No. What does that have to do with being a man? Why not teach girls and boys to be able to stand? You know, because you see what that has done in the context of the war you are talking about. It now presents it as if women are weak, when it's actually not really the case.
Yeah, it's not the case.
It's because of how they were raised that they ended up breaking down in that situation and not being able to continue with the war, because they were taught that it's okay for them to accept and feel. When for men, it's like you can't feel, you can't admit what you are feeling pain, you are experiencing pain.
As much as I think socialization has played a part, I still think somehow it's still intrinsic in us.
But what do we have, even from scriptures, to suggest that?